Hello YouTube, bringing you a different video, and that is on my matchlock musket, and that's the big gun in the middle, and that is a 16th century British matchlock. They call basically a fishtail musket, as you can see why. And it's interesting because it's in between the gun sort of the gun it replaced. Above that is a replica of a medieval handgun, which was the first real firearm, which was nothing more than essentially a small barrel on a stick. And that's exactly what you're looking at. Is the top one is a medieval handgun, and below it, of course, is a flintlock. That being a British Brown Bess pattern 1748 artillery carbine. And the matchlock musket, of course, you can see the piece of slowmatch that's in the jaw. That would have literally been lit, and you have the simple pan. As you squeeze the tiller, which is the handle, there's no real trigger on that particular gun. Some of them later ones did have triggers. But this version, you simply squeeze upward, and that pulls, it's a simple spring, pulls the slow match into the pan and fires the gun. When you hear of the term musketeer, unlike what you see in movies where you see them always fighting with swords, this is what they would have used. A musketeer would have had something along the lines of this. A French would have had their version with a smaller Nicolette, so on and so forth. This particular one, being British, was what you would have seen in the early days of like Jamestown, when they first started to settle here, onto Plymouth Rock. They would have brought guns like this. This would have been what you'd seen in the early mid-1600s. This would have been what you would have seen used here. They're extremely heavy. They're about the same length overall as a full-size Brown Bess. The gun below, of course, is an artillery carbine. It's 10 inches shorter than a normal Brown Bess, but the length of a Brown Bess, like an early pattern, a longland pattern, Brown Bess is 62 inches overall, and they weigh 10 pounds. Notice how much heavier the wood is and how much more wood there is with the matchlock versus the Bess. Okay, even with a full-size Brown Bess weighing 10 pounds, the amount of wood and material in the matchlock makes it much heavier. This gun's probably close to 13 pounds. So imagine carrying this thing around the early frontier when you first get here, just traipsing, and they would have carried these. They would have had a racing stick where they could have used that to place the gun on and then fire it from there. But oftentimes they also would have just simply carried this, because it was the firearms that they had at the time. Very slow, of course you had to keep the match going in order to fire the gun. But actually, I can tell you, having shot this gun, and I'm going to shoot this gun, you'll see it in this video, they're actually surprisingly on par with any other smoothbore musket. This one here is slightly larger. It's more like a 76 caliber. It roughly, you can fire the 690 round ball like you'd use in the Bess. I usually fire 715s, something along those lines, and roughly 70-80 grains of powder. And again, it is surprisingly accurate. It is surprisingly reliable. I wouldn't say it's as reliable as you can expect of this type of firearm. As far as accuracy, it's no different than any other more modern smoothbore musket. So I would say modern, saying 1700s, flintlocks, percussion smoothbores. This technology of that hasn't changed. It's still a smoothbore musket, round, straight barrel, no rifling, still a lead round ball coming out. It still roughly suffers from the same accuracy problems that any other musket Later on, that was a smoothbore, came after, had the same issues. But these guns were very common on the early days of the frontier. They had the battle not far from here, 1609, between the French under Samuel de Champlain, who was aligned to the Wendat and the Huron, targeted the Mohawk, and the French, with 3 matchlocks, killed 3 Mohawk chiefs. That started an arms race up here. The Mohawk, who at that time were used to fighting with literally clubs, arrows, and wearing wooden armor, abandoned that and then went straight to the Dutch, which is now Albany, and traded and basically told the Dutch, we want guns, we want guns, we want something to take to counter this. And that arms race changed the whole face of the Northeast, and which led to the Beaver Wars. Actually, that was the start of the Beaver Wars, and it literally changed the whole dynamics. The French and Indian Wars followed, and it just spiraled into that, and then of course the rest is history. But it was with guns like this, the matchlocks. They were the first guns here. Wheel locks were too expensive, wheel locks were too delicate. Matchlocks, as simple as they were simple to fix, simple to use, very rugged. As you can see, it is a very, very stout, rugged piece of machinery. There's very few parts to this gun. The lock, such as it is no more than 3 or 4 parts. It's extremely simple to work on. It's extremely simple to use. There were just so very few elements to this gun to make it work, and it was just a natural progression up from the medieval handgun, which went from the late mid-1300s right up until they started using these, and from there you have the progression of firearms. Fire! So the next time you'll see this will be at the range. I'll be putting out a man-sized silhouette target, and we'll see what this gun can do.